I don't believe that balance exists. I believe it's wholeness.
I'm whole to begin with, but I have work to do.
Wholeness to me is being able to be your own bridge to your heart, through your heart.
My name is Nisha Wingle, and I am the founding executive, and I'm so glad that you are here. This show is one of the fun things I get to do. Leave a review, let us know what you think. And then you can please, if you go and subscribe to the Wholeness Network, then join us again, because we have other episodes coming up that are exciting, and we usually bring in our experts and give you the opportunity to ask them questions and get real-time support for your life. So our experts are from all over the world, and they have given us some of their best and most amazing content. And we have created the Wholeness Library, which is full of meditations, classes, kind of some follow-along techniques, and more. So if you think of it like Netflix for wellness is what we kind of say. So you can try the library free and see what you think. And it is a perfect way to come back to balance and wholeness when life throws its daily hardships at us. It is perfect for education or a morning routine to get you going, or to wind down at the end of the day. So if you haven't already, I urge you to go to the library and start to take seriously your ability to live in a state of wholeness. That's our goal. That's our mission. That's our passion. But today I thought I would do a little something different, because Halloween is coming up. And during this season of Halloween, a lot of people associate some of our wellness tools with scary or evil practices or weird, kind of thing. And so I thought I'd just have a little fun with it. And so that's what this is supposed to be. This is supposed to be fun and interactive. So if you have something to say, please go ahead and raise your hand, and you can ask and share as we go. I'm happy to answer questions for you, and that kind of thing. So about 10 or 15 years ago, I was not aware, or probably more likely, I was not, or more accurately, I should say, I was very opposed to the concept of crystals, maybe essential oils, astrology, tarot. Like, I was not the girl who was interested in these things. And if that is you, I totally get it. I was there. I get it. I know what you're saying, and that's okay. My point here is actually not to divert your path. I trust your path. I trust where you're at. Simply, I was really fascinated. I got to a point when I had to confront some uncomfort within myself, some, all the beliefs I had about myself and about the way things were. And one of the things I did was to educate myself. And I was really fascinated, and I would say empowered, actually. As I educated myself about these things, I realized that a lot of fear or anxiety was happening in the background of my life about these things, maybe, that really didn't need to be there. There wasn't really a need for that. So when I did educate myself, I freed myself in a way. And so that's why I like to share what I've learned with you, because it is helpful. That I didn't, like I say, it wasn't keeping me up at night, but it was like, oh, I had all these preconceived notions. So I want to begin with crystals. I was able to find articles about crystals from sources like Time Magazine, Better Homes and Gardens. Popular Mechanics had an article on crystals, and so did science.org. And there was a great article on sciencetimes.com about crystals. And here's what it said, actually. I'm going to read it word for word. Healing crystals can be traced back to various cultures throughout history. Ancient Egyptians, Greeks, Romans, Chinese, and Native Americans all incorporated crystals into their spiritual and healing practices. Many times, that word healing creates complications, but the definition of healing is is to make whole. That's the idea of healing. And so this is out of the article for a little bit, by the way. So we call them healing crystals, and then people, we get stuck on this physical healing, but healing means to make whole. And being whole is a feeling or a state of being. It can be attained even if we're ill or have a disease. We can attain healing or wholeness, right? I suggest that this is how crystals are meant to be called healing stones. They can be useful because they help us in healing or becoming whole. The article goes on to say that healing crystals and gemstones have been played a part in all religions. They are mentioned throughout the Bible. And one specific reference is the breastplate of Aaron, or the high priest's breastplate, as mentioned in the book of Exodus. And it's clearly in this state used for symbolism rather than healing, right? It's used for symbolism. And it consisted of stones such as carnelian, turquoise, amethyst, agate, lapis lazuli, I had to look this up, how to say it, lazuli, and jasper, clear quartz, and aquamarine, to like name a few. And though if you're anywhere familiar with healing crystals, these are some of the most common crystals used today for their ability to return ourselves to wholeness, like we say. And so I think it's very telling that that was part of it. In the Quran, the fourth heaven is composed of garnet. The kalpa tree, I don't know if I'm saying that right, which represents an offering to the gods in Hinduism, is said to be made entirely of precious stones. And a Buddhist text from the 7th century describes a diamond throne situated near a tree of knowledge. And we may think that these things are mentioned because of their worth or their value, their monetary value. But what if there was a symbol? What if it was symbolic? That's my question today. What if it was symbolic, and that's why it was mentioned? That's a lot of what crystals are there for. They're there to be symbolic for our intention of that day, our intention of what we want. So another really, really interesting article I found was in Forbes magazine, and it was called "The Benefits of Healing Crystals Supported by Science." And they said that the number one scientific reasoning for crystals working was the placebo effect. So I say, okay. The next reason why they had to look at it from a scientific perspective was because there's cross-cultural significance. So the fact that it's showing up in different cultures and in different areas, there must be something to it. That was kind of what they were saying, because otherwise it just kind of dies off. But because it's showing up across different cultures, that in the scientific method is significant, adds some significance to it. And then I am not going to get this right, but they said the piezoelectric effect, I don't know if that's right, and what that is, I had to look that up, a scientific principle used in part to explain vibrational medicine. So this is what that is. And this enables crystals to transform, kind of this idea is that it transforms pressure into another kind of energy, such as light, electricity, sound, and then amplify it. So the thing that I thought about this is, like, in almost every electronic device, there's a quartz crystal meant to amplify. That's its duty, is to help amplify either so it helps clocks be more accurate, because before they would lose time over time, and it amplifies the energy of it so that it can be more correct in time. In this article, they also talk about what to use them for. So they say to use crystals in meditation, and it says holding or gazing at a crystal that represents a mantra, emotion, or intention is a simple and effective way to return to your meditation practice when the mind wanders. So it helps bring it back. And on a more practical level, they serve as a grounding tool, says this man that they interviewed. So they also talk about crystals, wearing crystals. Many crystal healers recommend wearing crystals on your skin or your clothes to benefit most from the vibrational medicine that they talk about. And he says they place clients on, or crystals on their client's body, on a chakra or energy center, and then works with them and uses it that way. The other way we can use crystals is decoration, and you see it all the time. You see it; it's very popular. A certified holistic practitioner and founder of a stone center suggests adding crystal to your home to maintain healthy feng shui within your home. Another way we can use crystals is for spa treatments and wellness. And many holistic health practitioners use crystals in facials and massages and even chiropractic adjustments. So that's some ways that crystals get used. And I just was fascinated. Whenever I think about crystals, I'm always fascinated about this story. So quickly, some background. In 1953, a scientist named Stanley Mueller performed an experiment where he sent an electric charge through a flask of a chemical solution and created amino acids, which amino acids are the building blocks of life. So it was super exciting because it was the idea of maybe this is how life began on this earth, through shallow ponds. It was this idea. How could that happen? Well, he suggested that maybe some electricity hit through a lightning or something like that, created the amino acids, and then that's how it began. So, and they've repeated this experiment lots of times. They've never been able to move past the amino acids, but it was a big deal at the time, and it still is considered a big deal. But there was a man, I watched a show, and he had a different hypothesis, and he thought that maybe instead of the shallow pond scenario for life here, a scientist thought that there was something called hydrothermal vents deep in the ocean, where he thinks that maybe there was enough that they could do that there. So he put forth this experiment, and he was, and he thought, I'm going to see if I can repeat what he got, get some amino acids through this chemical reaction, if he could mimic the underground vents, these underground thermal vents. So he did it, and it was funny. I've got a link that goes right to the video, and he says we put it in there, and we were so excited. We had this big hypothesis, and we ran the experiment, and nothing happened. And they were kind of baffled because the science suggested that something should have happened, it should have happened. Well, then he realized that there were lots of minerals, and there were lots of things down at the bottom of the ocean. So we would call them, crystals is a name for minerals and rocks. In fact, we often call it, the Wholeness Network, we often call the crystals just the highest form of minerals. They just have the purest form of minerals, and we take minerals into our body every single day. So he decided there was minerals, there was rocks, there was different components down there. So he added those minerals and rocks to the solution, and that's when he was able to create amino acids from deep sea thermal vents. So I just think that was interesting. When I watched that, I just went, hey, he's putting crystals were part of it. Crystals were part of making human life. That makes sense that they would support us. I don't know if that's true, but that's where I went when I watched it. I thought, yeah, it's important. It's interesting that minerals are valuable to human life, or to the building blocks of human life, let's say. All right, now on to essential oils. And I get a few of the articles I found from Johns Hopkins Medical Center, some from Scientific America, and they talked about how essential oils are basically plant extracts. They've made these by steaming or pressing various parts of the plant, whether that's the flower or the bark or the leaves or the fruit, to capture the compounds that produce the fragrance or the essence. And it can actually take several pounds of a plant to produce a single bottle of essential oil. And then, in addition to creating scent, essential oils perform other functions in the plants too. So I've heard of some, it's like some of it's like their immune system. So you're using the immune system of a plant and borrowing from that immune system. And there's different other properties. One of the scientific studies that have revealed positive results from essential oils involves patients with dementia. This is a place that they've been able to look at. And although contrary to common lore, let's see, this is what the article says: drinking a tablespoon of fish oil every day won't starve off dementia. There is evidence that the balm from lemon oil reduces agitation in patients with dementia, according to the study in the Journal of Clinical Psychiatry. So that was an interesting study because with people with dementia, it wasn't like they could be influenced by their opinion very, very easily. So they state that quite often. And then there are other proven success stories for essential oils, such as the treatment of acne with tea tree oil and the treatment of hair loss with oils like thyme, rosemary, lavender, and cedarwood. Research into the use of essential oils found in citrus fruits is particularly intriguing due to their natural antibacterial qualities. For example, citrus oil, particularly when combined with Dead Sea salts, was known to inhibit bacterial growth in mice and act as an anti-inflammatory agent. The citrus essential oil, bergamot, could help fight the growth of common causes of food poisoning, so like Listeria or E. coli or staph. So most of these studies have not extended to the clinical trial, which means they haven't moved into really getting people, and that's because it's not called for. But that means there's still more to do before essential oils would be prescribed by a physician, because these studies are kind of just like, let's just check out and see. It's not a clinical study where we're doing blind studies and that kind of thing. It's just hasn't been done. And something about essential oils, there are dozens of essential oils, all with different fragrances and chemical makeups. We did a really interesting podcast episode with Allison about essential oils not too long ago. And which essential oil you need really depends on what you're looking for, your symptoms or the fragrance you're looking for and prefer. And some of the most popular essential oils, according to this magazine, Forbes, is lavender oil. So many people find that the lavender scent is relaxing. It's often used to help relieve stress and anxiety and promote good sleep. Another really popular one is tea tree oil, also called melaleuca. And this essential oil is used, it's been used by the Australians Aboriginal people for wound healing. And today it's commonly used for acne or athlete's foot or insect bites. It's kind of like antibacterial kind of a thing, I think, is what goes through my mind when I think about it. Peppermint oil is another popular one. And there is some evidence that peppermint essential oil relieves some irritable bowel symptoms. So when taken in a capsule. And it can also relieve tension headaches when applied topically. So just put it right where your headache is. Lemon oil, many people find the scent of lemon oil a mood booster. And it also is used in homemade cleaning products. So we think about, it's true, Mr. Clean was in lemon form. What was it? Joy laundry or Joy dish detergent or Tide laundry detergent. There was always the lemon scent. And it wasn't just because that smelled good. It was because back when we were kind of making our own kind of stuff, it had properties that were useful for that and beneficial for that. That was the essential oil. Was that back in the day, that's what they used, those natural things when they made those things. So they just kind of transferred forward. The most important thing to consider when shopping for essential oils is product quality. Now, this is from the article. I'm going to read it word for word. But figuring out which oils are the best is challenging since there is no government agency in the U.S. that provides a grading system or certification for essential oils. Many companies claim their essential oils are therapeutic grade, in quotes, but that's a marketing term. So it's something we have to think about. It sounds really exciting and important, but it is a marketing term. There is no agency that has stamped a letter of approval on any essential oils. And unfortunately, there are lots of products you might find online or in stores that aren't harvested correctly or have something in them that isn't listed on the label. That's really difficult with essential oils. They are just not regulated. So here's some tips they gave for shopping for pure essential oils. They said to look at the label. It should include the Latin name of the plant. It should include the information on purity or other ingredients added to it, and that it should talk about where it was grown. That's really helpful. Another way to find essential oils is to purchase products from well-known companies. And so look up the company, see who they are, make sure they've been around for several years and that they have people that a lot of people, hopefully, that recommend them. They also say to make sure that the jar is dark colored, that it comes in glass containers that are dark, because pure essential oils are highly concentrated and they can dissolve plastic bottles and that contain the oils. And usually you're going to look for small brown or blue glass bottles, and that helps the integrity, because it is an oil, it is a natural thing, right? And it's when it's pure, it's going to because it doesn't have different compounds interacting with each other. If it's just pure, it's going to last longer. And so that's why another thing is sometimes when they mix, as soon as you mix it with another something else, even if it's just to extend it, you've added another compound, and so those are going to start to break down. And then the other thing they said is to avoid fragrance oils. Like they'll talk about, you might find the word fragrance or perfume, and they kind of are mixing those up between essential oils, and they're entirely different. A fragrance is entirely different. They're not suitable. That's not the same thing for aromatherapy. Instead, look for bottles that contain a single essential oil in its purest form and has no other filters. That's where you're going to get the most purity and the most integrity within the essential oil. Also, compare prices, they said, because essential oils range in price depending on how involved in harvesting and production they are. So they can do it cheap, but then it's just, harvested cheaply. There is a wide variety of prices. Also, like if you're looking at a company and every single oil is the same price, that's a little suspect, because what they're saying here is that the harvesting is different for each oil. So, and so there's going to be a price difference between the different essential oils. Rose, sandalwood are more expensive. Those are going to be some more expensive oils, they say. So sweet orange is probably on the less end, they say. So if you find a really inexpensive oil that's like rose you get for a cheap, it's probably not that pure. There's something else going on. All right. Another area that I want to talk about is either oracle or tarot cards. And I just thought this was fascinating as I did the background work and really kind of understood what they were. Because like I said in the beginning, the kind of questions just sat in the background and I didn't know what they were, or it was just like, no, those are not good. I don't like those. And it was taking up some of my capacity in the background to make sure those were out there and left behind. And when I actually just kind of researched and found out what they were, it was kind of funny, because they're just really not that. They're just literally like more like a piece of paper, right? I'm like kind of making a piece of paper have more power than it really deserves. And the history is interesting because it actually began as a game in Italy, somewhere around 1400 CE. And this is about the same time that the printing press was invented. So maybe that was a factor in the way that it spread, because it was able to be printed. That's a thought about it. But the cards actually were associated with the Roman Catholic faith, surprisingly, in Italy, right? This was a game, it began. And then, hundreds of years went by, and then somehow during the 18th and 19th centuries, so 1700s, 1800s, the cards became a popular method of divination among various occultists and spiritualists and astrologers and magical practitioners. It just kind of became something that just kind of happened. It wasn't created for that, but they picked up and they started using that in those time periods. And what's interesting is in the 20th and 21st centuries, the tarot has been used as a form of creative reflection, meditation, a therapeutic practice, or spiritual exploration. So it's interesting how a lot of the ideas we have are from the 1700s and 1800s, but in the 20th and 21st century, it really has evolved quite again from the time it was at the 1400s to 1700s. Here we are again, using them for meditation or reflection or therapeutic practice. I think that's a fascinating way to think about it. And I would agree. Sometimes there's just some therapeutic to it, to picking a card and pondering on it and thinking about it. And what does this mean to me? And how does this apply to me? But the symbolism and imagery of the cards, They draw on a wide range of traditions, including Renaissance art, classical mythology, early Gnosticism and Christianity, Jewish and Islamic mysticism, Hermetic traditions, alchemy, numerology, even that occultism is part of that's been in there. Like they've taken that. Popular culture is part of that, literature, art, religion, all of these different areas have been an influence to what is at the modern day, what we know as the tarot right now. And I didn't know at the beginning very much at all about tarot. And tarot is more about, it's kind of more about having it's kind of like a deck of cards with diamonds, hearts, spades. It's the same thing. In fact, they have pentacles, wands, swords, cups. So there's 4 suits. And then the difference is they have what's called the greater, what is it called? It just went out of my head, but it's like, so then you have the priestess or the world, or the devil. The devil is one of the cards, and it's there to represent change. It's, the death card is representing rebirth, the things like that. So it's all about the symbolism of it. It's how do we take what, how do we understand the symbolism of the card? And so that, and it's really much a lot in the art of the actual card that it gets its meaning. But I thought it was interesting. I looked up, I wanted to look up what was said against it. So in Christianity.com, I found this. It said the main use of tarot cards is for divination purposes, giving insight into your love life, finances, family problems, future, spouse, or any other questions you might have. There is no such thing as neutral divination. It is spiritually dangerous. Many Bibles mention against such things happening early in the Old Testament alongside verses telling believers not to eat. So, okay, this was what was interesting. So it's in the Bible, like they say this is wrong. And it is in the Bible alongside verses telling believers not to eat pork, not to trim their beards, to get tattoos, to cut the sides of their hair, to eat oysters, to go to church within 40 days of giving birth, to work on the Sabbath, or to eat fat, or to touch a goat, or to sell land permanently. These are all the other things that are lined up right in the same verses in the Bible. So, that was an interesting thing. So, but I thought it was fascinating because, on the Christianity.org, it called it spiritually dangerous. And yet it goes on to give a pretty good detailed explanation of the tarot, really informative, and yet eventually calling it daft and silly. So you'll have to make a decision for yourself about the use of tarot. Again, like I say, I believe that paper is benign and it can be used as a tool, and the good or bad of that tool derives from the intention of the use of that tool, like with so many things in our lives. And then also to switch over, there are cards that are called oracle cards. And I think it's funny that tarot, we don't really have that as kind of whatever. Oracle is really about divination, yet those seem to be the more benign cards, which is kind of funny. They sound more like divination cards, but these cards are more often just simple phrases like have a good day, or keep on going. They're just these little good little messages that help make sense of things. I love it where it's like it helps me make sense of how I'm feeling. If I'm feeling down, I'll pick a card and it'll just give me a little boost of what I need. I grabbed a card. I think one of the cards I have was like messages God wants for you, and one of them, I picked the card today, I think it's something like you make my heart sing. So if you just take a few minutes and ponder about what that means, to think of a God to feel joy, that you bring him joy in his heart, that's just beautiful, I think, right? And it helps me just feel supported by God or by the universe. And I even have created my own cards, and I tried to grab one. And I don't know if you would call them oracle cards or not, but they are my daily thrive cards. And because I love cards, I just love being able to pick a card and say, oh, that's meaningful. So this idea is just their body, mind, spirit, soul, body, mind, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically. And it just gives you a little little thought for the day. This one says, love is the strongest power in the universe. Love is a tool for creation and is the threads of connection. Love is always flowing freely and is ours for the taking. Love is infinite and eternal, forever multiplying, expanding, and inviting you in. So just a little thought. And then raise the vibration. It says, okay, so going along with the theme of love, there's the oil, which is rose. There's a crystal, which is rose quartz. And then the color therapy, or if you're feeling like you need an extra boost, then put something on your body that's pink or green, or just to remind you of love. And then there's a practice. So this day, it said, find a comfortable space to relax and imagine love flowing out of your heart and into the immediate area around you. Imagine it growing outward and upward until it seems to fill the whole earth. Trust that your efforts are received. Repeat the cycle in return, allowing you to receive love from the whole earth down into your heart. So you can take as much time as you want. But anyway, so I love cards because they just give me a little beginning of the day. To me, that I just love having something to kind of just give me some direction and help me out. So I really appreciated that. All right. Lastly, what are we looking at time? Okay, great. Lastly, I wanted to look in the idea of spiritual gifts or psychic powers. And you can think about how you prefer to think of them or refer to them. Some people are going to talk about being psychic. Other people are going to talk about being spiritual gifts. So I decided to ask AI to give me a list, and I think it did a pretty good job. So the list that it gave me for spiritual gifts are wisdom, the ability to make sound judgments and decisions, often based on deep spiritual insight and understanding. So this is a gift, spiritual gift. A spiritual gift is knowledge, the gift of insight and understanding, particularly in things of faith and spirituality. Another gift is faith, a strong and unwavering belief in higher power or divine source, often accompanied by a deep trust in the divine plan. One thing to think about too is it's like, some of these you're going to say, oh, that's just easy. And the other ones are going to say, I don't got that. And that's the whole point. We have different gifts that we are born with or blessed with, and then we can attain new gifts, but we will not have some of these things will not have it. Another one is the gift of healing, the ability to facilitate physical, emotional, or spiritual healing in others through prayer, laying on of hands, or other spiritual practices. This is AI. AI says that miracles are another spiritual gift, the capacity to perform supernatural acts that go beyond the laws of nature, often attributed to divine intervention. Prophecy, the ability to receive and communicate messages or insights from a divine source, often related to a future event or spiritual guidance. So, in the spiritual gifts realm, you're going to call it prophecy. You're going to call it a psychic in the other one, you'll see in a minute. Discernment is another spiritual gift, the ability to distinguish between true and the false, or to perceive the presence of good and evil, or positive and negative. Speaking in tongues, the ability to speak in languages unknown to individuals, often associated with a phenomenon where a person speaks in a kind of divine language. So, that's another thing too. I don't know much about that, but that's what AI said. Another one is the interpretation of tongues, the ability to understand and interpret the messages. So that's another. Service is another gift, they said, a willingness and inclination to help and serve others, often with a strong sense of duty and compassion. Teaching is another spiritual gift, the ability to communicate and explain spiritual truths and principles to others, often with great clarity and effectiveness. Encouragement, the gift of offering emotional and spiritual support and uplifting those in need. Hospitality, a talent for making others feel welcome and cared for, often through the provision of food, shelter, and comfort. Leadership is another one, the ability to guide and direct others in a spiritual context, often with a strong sense of responsibility. So AI says these are spiritual gifts. Then when I asked AI about, what was the word I used? Let me see. It was psychic powers. So I said, what are some psychic powers? And it told me that one of them was telepathy. Telepathy is often described as the ability to transmit thoughts, feelings, or information from one person's mind to another without the use of verbal or written communication. Clairvoyance or clear seeing is said to involve the ability to perceive information about people, events, or objects beyond one's normal sensory perception. Precognition is the supposed ability to predict or have foreknowledge of the future events or outcomes. That's the prophecy. This could include being in dreams or other events that happen before they happen. They just kind of know. Psychokinosis, also known as telekinesis, is the claimed ability to move or manipulate objects by the power of one mind without any physical contact. And remote viewing. Remote viewing is the practice where individuals claim to see or gather information from distant or hidden targets or locations using their psychic abilities. Aura reading is another one that AI came up with. Some psychics claim to be able to read auras or see them, which are believed to be energy fields or color halos that surround individuals and can reveal information about their physical, emotional, and spiritual state. Mediumship. Mediums claim to communicate with the spirits of the deceased and convey messages or information from the afterlife to the living, which I think is interesting. So a medium is is specific, according to AI, with people that have passed on versus I don't know what was one of the other ones, which is like just with heavenly realms, which maybe is different. Empathy is not necessarily considered a psychic power. It is the ability to feel and understand the emotions and feelings of others, sometimes to an unusually high degree. So both of these things, with some shift in vocabulary words, you can see how these two lists can really kind of easily be combined, and they can become, it's just a matter of what vocabulary word you would like to use. And it's fascinating to me with some of these gifts. I remember I worked with a young man who was 14 years old. He was a young 14-year-old boy. I mean, just a typical kid. He was having some struggles in school and getting in trouble at home, and he was just having a hard time. So his mom sent him over to me, and after a few sessions, he kind of, in this way, he's like, hey, and I knew it was a time of safety. And he said, I wanted to tell you something. He says, I can hear color. And I said, okay. It was something he hadn't ever, I don't think he'd allowed himself to really say out loud. And I feel like it took some time for him to trust me with that. And I said, okay. So I grabbed what I had, which I had, the colorful things I had around me were some crystals, actually. So he had a blindfold on, and I said, let's check it out. So I would take the crystal and I'd put it right next to his ear. So he couldn't see it. And he had the blindfold on, and I would say, is this red or is this blue? And when we did that, he guessed correctly 100% of the time, 100% of the time. And I was amazed myself at that. And I think it was just, what does that do? I don't know. How is that good? I don't know. But it was something that I think the most important thing it did for him is it just allowed him to be a little bit more of himself. And I know that I myself have had to learn to develop and acknowledge some of these abilities within myself. And it's been really hard in certain ways to allow myself them. It's been really strange. And one of the things that was helpful, and I wanted to make sure I talked about, was the idea, there's this true thing. And I was looking it up for this thing and getting some really interesting information about the U.S. military's remote viewing program. So if you want a fascinating rabbit hole to go down, Google it. And so I looked at a couple of documents. These are on the CIA website, and it was a 97-page document, talked about, it was interviewing experts and thoughts on the matter of trying to make sense of, are we really going to do this? And what are we going to do? Because this is really controversial, but this is what we're going to do. And this is, I'm going to read right from it. In fact, I took a picture, so I'm going to get a little close. So it said, it talked about U.S. national security agencies have been interested in remote viewing since at least World War II, when Hitler reportedly relied on astrologers and seers for intelligent information. Approximately 50 years later, the government still cannot disprove that psychic phenomenon is something to be taken seriously. In 1992, Defense Authorization Act tasked the Defense Intelligence Agency to initiate an aggressive study on anomalous phenomena. The 1992 Act directs, quote, a continued robust effort to evaluate the activities of foreign governments, particularly the activities of the Soviet Union. So their goal was to try and see what was going on over there. Then in a 178 page document, which you can just get lost in, I found this. It said, using the standards applied to any other area of science, it is concluded that psychic functioning has been well established. The statistical results of the studies examined are far beyond what is expected by chance. Arguments that these results could be due to methodical flaws in the experiments are soundly refuted. Effects of similar magnitude to those found in the government-sponsored research at SRI, and the names of the places that did it, have been replicated at a number of laboratories across the world. Such consistency cannot be readily explained by claims of flaws or fraud. It is clear that this author that this is possible and has been demonstrated. And the conclusion is not based on belief, but rather on commonly accepted scientific criteria. It's been replicated in a number of forms. So what they found was, the thing that was difficult, that they found, that's the trick of it is that they found that some people were better than others in remote viewing. And so in order, at the end of the day, when they had to figure out, are we keeping this going or not? Here's where it broke down, which I think is so fascinating, because by the scientific method, what we have to do is you have to have the double blind, you have to be able to prove it with no interference. Well, they found that there was definitely some people that were better at it than other people. So if they took those people that were better at it than other people, then before they even started the test, they had decided that it existed. So there was really no way to actually do the science, to actually just say, okay, here's our new way of doing things, and here's why. And that was what these arguments were all about, because it was like, I have to say, well, this person's better at it. Well, we're trying to even see if it exists. And so that was what tripped them up, is that there were some people that were better at it, and yet they could teach everybody to do it. There was enough, like it said in that previous one, there was enough, it went beyond chance, when they do the mathematics, that they were getting it right beyond chance. And so they had to acknowledge that it was there. But as far as moving forward in this, and who knows, maybe they shut it down and open it up under another name. You never know. I mean, if any of you've watched The Bourne Identity, that's a thing. Maybe that's it. But this was the whole, it was just interesting to read that, trying to get these experts to kind of, they just didn't know what to say about it. It was just really fascinating. So that, and they had to come up with ways to make it, should we fund this more, so we didn't know how to fund it because it existed, but we don't even know what to call it. It was interesting. It was funny. All right. So that's what I wanted to talk about as far as those kind of woo-woo type things. I think now more and more they're less woo-woo. I think you can find, at the dollar store, I found essential oils. I found chakra candles. I found little crystal sets. You can find little tarot cards or oracle cards almost everywhere as well. It's a big change in the last decade as far as the commonness of those kind of things, but to some it's still a little out there. And so we just wanted to make fun of that during the holiday season and just kind of go with it. But I promised a couple of spooky stories. So I wanted to share a couple of stories. One is one that I'll share, and then I had a few that were given to me, and then we'll move on to questions. So make sure to stay to the end if you have a question. So here we go. So there was a book. It's a really interesting book called Proof of Angels, and it was written by the same co-author of Proof of Heaven by Eben Alexander. We interviewed him. So Proof of Heaven is about a medical doctor who was in a coma, and he had an experience through a near-death experience, and it really transformed him because he was a medical doctor who specialized in this kind of thing and recognized that the brain function that was offline was the one that should have been, that had been his reason, at least, for understanding why people have these near-death experiences. And yet, so he himself had this profound experience that he knew didn't fit with what he was, what he had believed or thought, so he could look at the data, he could see the images of his brain, and knowing that those parts that were offline were the parts that he needed to create this for himself. So it's a really interesting book called Proof of Heaven. So that's Eben Alexander. We had him on the podcast and interviewed him, and it was fascinating. But so it was the co-author that helped him write that book, wrote this book called Proof of Angels. So kind of funny. And in this book, there was a small town police officer. And in fact, when I was looking online yesterday, there was a whole panel of officers talking about it. And they had come to a scene of an accident where a car was in a river upside down. It had been upside down, and they're trying to, work through it. And they hear a voice say, "Help, help, help." And so that they just start, "Oh my gosh, we gotta help." And so there's a whole hour footage of trying to get this car out of the water by the body cameras of the policemen. And when they were finally able to get the car turned right side up, after what they believe from the time a neighbor heard a crash, it was 13 hours or so that this car had been flipped upside down. It was clear that the mother had died on impact, but there was an 18-year-old little baby Lily who had somehow survived, and they pulled this baby out. And so this story is just kind of about how that impacted, especially this one police officer, because he didn't know what to think about this idea. And it was really kind of, similar to Eben Alexander, where it just kind of rocked his world. And it's a fascinating book. So that's always a fun little story, little maybe spooky story. In fact, you can watch the video. It's kind of wild. It's just kind of wild. Okay, some other stories that came in. This one, when I was 8 or 9, this is from Shanna. When I was 8 or 9, my mom, sister, cousin, and I were driving from Tucson, Arizona to Salt Lake City and lost about 6 hours of the drive. Like, it was early afternoon, and suddenly the sun was setting, and the tape, it was the late 80s, early 90s, was on the other side as if it had been looping for hours. We were all singing one song at the top of our lungs, and then it felt as if we'd come out of a haze, and the song was different and no one was singing, and we were definitely hours down the road from where we had started singing. So that is spooky. Just all of a sudden, there was just time shifted. I wonder if everybody had that same experience. That's fascinating. Thank you for that story. This next story is from Shell. They said Shell. I have a habit of reading before bed. One night I finished reading, set my book on the nightstand, and put my glasses on top of it like I always do. But the next morning, my glasses were gone. I know I had them when I went to sleep because my vision is bad enough that there's no way I could have read without them. So at the time, I didn't have a backup pair, so my parents had to come over and help me look for them because she was blind. We searched all over my apartment, but they were gone. So my parents took me to get a new pair. Months later, I went through the same nighttime routine, but when I woke up in the morning, both pairs of glasses were sitting on the book I had been reading. Oh, whoa, that's amazing. Amazing stories. Thank you for sharing. This one is by Liesel. When I was a kid, my mom, so cute, we must be, and grandparents took me to see a play about prisoners set in an old jail that was now a tourist spot. To me, the actors were too realistic, and I started crying, and we had to leave. Chatting to my mom a few years ago, and apparently it wasn't a play. It was just a visit to an old empty jail. So, oh man, so your memory of it was seeing people interacting. That's fascinating. I totally get that. When we went to Alcatraz, I mean, but it was just, yeah. I mean, my memory of it, it's almost like it's in a movie. And I've always thought, well, it's always in a movie, so maybe that's it. But yeah, I don't think I saw it at the time, but you could feel it. In 2007, this is from, let's see, who we got? Jen. I'm just going to give first names. In 2007, I was actively looking for a puppy to adopt. One night, I dreamed about a tiny, gray, fuzzy puppy that was mine. Fast forward a few weeks, and I was with my mom picking up her new puppy. And when the same puppy from my dream was right in front of me, I tried to leave without her, and she kept following behind me. She was a once-in-a-lifetime dog, and I'm so grateful I got to a sneak preview into who she would be. Oh, there you go. So see, there's one of your gifts showing right up. So that's fascinating. I have another one, but it doesn't have a name. No one was saying anything until my cousin suddenly said, I don't know if that's one. I don't know if that's one. Okay. So we're going to move on to some questions that came in. And if anybody has a question, they can go ahead and put it in the chat or get to me anytime. We try to have these questions every so often. I love questions. So if you have a question, you can email me at michelle@thewholenessnetwork.com and ask me questions. That's the greatest way to find out what to do a podcast episode on or to answer in these kind of things. We do these about once a month for now. We hopefully to move on to more often, but this is our time to get really interactive. So loving questions. Okay, first question, how do I begin using crystals? That was a genuine, simple question, but big. So how do you begin? I mean, that's the thing. We learn all about it, but what do you do? So I suggest to go to a metaphysical store. They're everywhere. They're in like a lot of malls even have these things, and they might just have a small section of stones. That's okay. But you can Google, Google Maps, metaphysical store near me or crystal shop near me, and go to one, plan a time and go and just look at the stones. And then you can pick them up and hold them and feel them. Let's see, I've got this one right here. This is more big than you could even do, but just hold it in your hand and have an intention, that you're going to buy one that supports you. That's just your intention. And many times they have the properties right there. You can just read the little cards of what the properties are of the stones. And you can do that, but you can also just, have a hunch. The colors are a lot of times they're associated with the chakras. So if you know the chakras, you can say, like I'm wanting help with my relationships and my love. So I'm going to look for either an orange or a pink or a green, if this one's a lot about, your voice, your throat chakra. So that's why I have it with me right here now. It's just to help support. My intention was to support me to be able to speak clearly. One of my astrology chart I had, my wound was in my house that's about communication. And she said, you even have a lisp. And I didn't think about that, but when I hear other people speak, they can just speak in one fluid line, and I'm usually choppy. And so I thought, it's true. I have this, I'm different in my communication. So I keep this with me as an intention to just help support my talking, my words, my voice. So that's how you can use it to go along with the throat chakra, or any of the chakras, I should say. Or if you just like the way the stone looks, that's okay. That's okay too. So just then just take it home and then think about what you want it to represent for you. I want this to remind me of this moment. Whenever I go on walks or if I go someplace, I'll grab a stone. In fact, I was visiting back in Indiana this last weekend, and we went on this little walk, and my son said, "Did you get a stone? Did you get yourself a stone?" And so my kids all know it's just a way of me marking the time, and it's meaningful to me. So then you can hold it and you can intend for that stone to be a reminder of that whatever it is that you have, that intention. And then you can carry it with you every day, and you can feel and hold the stone as needed, and kind of just put yourself back into the memory of what your intention is. And you can play with these stones in a fun way, that they're just meant to be a supportive. It's all about what you put into it that what you get out, because I guarantee to some people it's just a rock and that's what they'll get out of it, and that's just fine. That's just fine. Okay, another question I got was, how do I deal with my spouse that doesn't like these kinds of things? So very common for one spouse to kind of be in this and one not. I was just talking about this the other day, but one of the things I would suggest is, for someone, I assume that they're probably more analytical minded, or that they're more of a mental person. So they're more, scientific or analytical or linear, or maybe they're even so creative that they just, they don't want to stop and learn they just want to do it for fun, which is fine, or whatever. I don't know exactly what your situation is. But one of the things I thought of when I saw this question was to, maybe together try and watch a couple of documentaries. So if you start to watch some documentaries about quantum mechanics, or even Einstein and how Einstein's theories came about, what they are, we kind of start to blend into this world a little bit. I was looking up, there was a great, amazing documentary. It's old, it's a little old fashioned, but it's called The Physics of Light. And it was really fascinating because it just they were just able to explain well some of these things that are just really kind of unexplainable. And when you go into quantum mechanics, that's the whole idea, is that the physics of the micro world and the physics of the macro world, which is the entire universe, don't always line up with our everyday physics that we have. And you can think about it as simply as, like, here on this earth, if I drop something, it falls to the ground. The physics of the moon is different. If I drop something, it does not fall to the ground. So that the physics are different. And so what that begins to do is it begins to just kind of shift that maybe there's a little more, maybe things aren't as concrete as we think. And those are scientific, right? So these kinds of movies, do they just kind of can shift the possibilities from fixed and unfathomable to, unfathomable and realistic. So they're still unfathomable, but it's like, oh, there's some realist to it. So that's fascinating. All right. We're doing so great. Okay. Lastly, a question I really wanted to make sure I answered. I'm so grateful that this question came in. The question was, are extraterrestrial dimensional beings whose role is to keep us from destroying ourselves with WMD? So are there beings whose their role it is to help us, to stop us from destroying ourselves with weapons of mass destruction, And I just have to stop at this question, because the reason why I was so grateful for this question to come in is because there's a lot of facets to this question. There's a lot in this question to look at. And the first one is the idea, depending on where you come from, you've stopped listening after the first are ETs, or extra dimensional beings. You stopped right there. So we got to kind of stop there for a minute and talk about what the idea of ETs, or extra dimensional beings, is what this person calls it. We have to talk about what that is. And that's the thing that took me the longest to kind of get over, but recognizing, because when I was first in this world, you would go to a conference, and someone would say, you have to have an intention and you've got to be focused on that attention. And then the next speaker would come up and they would say, you've got to let go. You've got to just release. And to me, those sounded like they were contradictory. And so I didn't understand. I was confused. And so I did a lot of pondering on it, because I was like, that doesn't, what is happening here? And the truth is when you move into a both and type of living, it only makes sense there. So anyway, so we have to think about, so the vocabulary words and ideas are both true. Those were both true, letting go and focusing on intention. And yet they are contradictory. So how does that work? So one of the ideas I want to talk about is just this idea of an ET, or extraterrestrial being. And I just thought the most extreme version of that is the idea in Christian tradition, where Jesus died and then came back to life. And then the Bible teaches that 40 days after his resurrection, he ascended into heaven both visibly and bodily is what and so there was this rising, the ascension, and it implies that he went somewhere else. So by the definition of the word extraterrestrial, one of the definition is coming from or existing outside the earth or its atmosphere. So we can even go there where it's like, where was that ascension? It was out there somewhere, but I don't think there would be very many people that would say that Jesus is an ET, but yet he is living there outside of this earth by very definition of the word alien or extraterrestrial. So so do you see how the definitions, the vocabulary words really are impacted by the meaning behind them? It's a big difference between just using a vocabulary word. If somebody started calling Jesus an extraterrestrial, people are going to say like, that's blasphemous, that's terrible. And yet, so we have to know where people are coming from. We have to understand where they're coming from. And so that's one important thing I wanted to talk about or pinpoint in this question. I think it was just so great because this is what comes up is then we're talking about, I'm going off with the idea of extraterrestrial and someone else is going off with the idea of an angel or a passed on loved one. And we think we're not having the same conversation at all. And we're arguing about we're arguing about it within this conversation. And yet, if we really kind of pull back and ask, what do you mean by that? I think a lot of times we're more aligned than we think, so we don't know. So I have to get to know, like, what is an extraterrestrial or as they call it, a extra dimensional being, that could be an angel, that could be, or is it a being from another planet developed purely through evolution, yet further along the evolutionary scale? Is that the definition? We have to understand what these are. But I encourage you just to think about that for yourself. What does that mean to you? What does that look like for you? And then how can you broaden that definition to include something that you didn't, that maybe you didn't think of, that it's like, oh, well, if somebody else called it that how would I feel about that under the same definition? Because we're probably not on the same page. But to answer the question, so are there beings there to help us, kind of stop us from destroying ourselves? So I will answer through my experience or my opinion. So I'm not going to tell you that I feel like I honor the fact that someone else may have a different interpretation, although I really, again, think that if we sat down and had a discussion, that it would be more a difference of vocabulary words rather than ideas. So what I would say is I think we do have beings that support us. I'm not sure that they have this idea of having to save us from ourselves, because the thing is, as we move into that word of save us, then we get into this idea that we get into a binary right or wrong, that there's a better way or a worse way for us to be. And that gets very tricky. Like I say, I'm living in this both and kind of world. And so, and I understand beings as loving and kind and that we are here to grow and learn. So that kind of gets a little sticky about saving, as far as like that we can't do, we're incapable on our own. And yet, I know that and I believe that our loved ones care for us and that they work with us maybe on an individual basis. So they have an individual interest in my life. And so because I think what's going on is, if you think about, like, let's say you're in a first grader, and that level of evolvement is in first grade, and then you've got a sixth grader, and then you've got a 12th grader, and then you've got a teacher, right? They're all humans, you would say, maybe, but they're living in different experiences, so they're not supposed to be the same. And so that teacher's going to care about that kindergartner or the first grader or whatever, and want to teach and grow that individual, but they're not so concerned about that they're going to make a decision in kindergarten that's going to just ruin them and they'll never be able to be a teacher. So there's that to look at. So I think, that there's people whose their support system, it doesn't evolve them or humanity to annihilate the planet. And so, yes, they would be working and supporting them. But I don't know, and maybe it's possible to swoop in and stop something that might affect other people. And, and at the same time, we also, I'm very aware that that there's an honoring of agency or of choice. And so I think both of these things are happening at the same time. And so, yeah, they're on an individual basis. Are they, because that's not supportive. If someone's going to blow up the planet, that does not evolve that individual. That does not give them experience that is useful very much. And so that would be their reason for kind of supporting them on an individual basis. And then, another factor to look at is that I also have a deep awareness in our interconnectedness here as human beings on the earth, and the power of love and things of light or goodness, yummy, feelings, positiveness, and they have an influence. And that's, I think, part of it too. I think that we are part of that influence when we add goodness or light or positivity or happiness to the world. And I would say, at the same time, another part of that is if I'm in grief or if I'm in sadness, I feel like that's still positivity in the world if I'm authentically living that, versus resisting. We get into a whole bunch of good and bad and right and wrong, which is that's just like, to me, that's just like, deciding that A is always going to say for apple. It's like, yes, there's an A and it says for apple, but there's once it gets very complicated, or all those rules that we learned in reading, this is the rule. And then pretty soon you find out there's always an exception to the rule. That's how it is it's like with good and bad and right and wrong and evil and goodness is there, it gets a little, it's like, yes, true. And there's, it's interesting, right? But I think I sense in this question some fear. I sense in this question some fear or some uncertainty. And I hear and see that for sure. I want to acknowledge that there's a lot of fear and uncertainty in the world right now. And I wish life was always good and easy for everyone. I really do. But the truth is, there is more good done in the world than bad. And if you look at the world on a micro level, with human beings interacting with other human beings on a daily basis, people are beautiful. People in real life in front of each other are beautiful beings most of the time, more often than not. A lot of goodness happens between everyday individuals, just simple individuals. Just, you're at a stop sign and you both kind of have stopped, and the one person says, go ahead and go. That's brotherhood. That's humanity. That's beautiful. Those small little things, that's happening all the time. So I just say, please don't give into the fear that is, sold to us. There are definite things that are going on in the world that are difficult. And, it's interesting because, there's some chaos happening in our world right now. They're not the majority, but we can't, again, just because they're not the majority, we don't say, well, those don't matter. And those that have lost loved ones in places like the Ukraine over the last couple of years, or in Israel, whether they're Jew or Palestinian, their world has been lost. The weapon of mass destruction has happened in their life. Their world is gone. And we can spend our time trying to prevent that from happening to us, but to them, it's the reality. But I know that when, and I know I get to say, I want to say, I know that area, that place holds a lot of terror and fear and worry, it's true. It's not like we can tell those people to just be happy. And this is the truth and I know it may be counterintuitive, but really we have this idea of like, okay, that's fearful. What's going to happen? What's going to happen? What's going to happen? But if we actually would stop and put our energy into grieving with those that have lost their world, their entire world, who they don't care if the button goes off or not. Like, that's meaningless to them. It has already gone off in their life. So if we actually join in with them for a minute and grieve with them and desire to comfort with them, and if we mourn with them, whether that's up close, or just at home for a few minutes, and luckily we get to go off from that few minutes and do something else, they don't. But if we actually spend some time, instead of worrying about what to do to stop that, if we actually go in and mourn with them, or spend some time thinking about them and holding them in our hearts, what's really fascinating is we don't have the room for fear. I just hope you'll try that. Just take a few minutes and think about the sorrow of the world and be with it for a minute. Just be with it and acknowledge it. And it's not your responsibility to fix it. It's not your responsibility to take it necessarily, you can't fix it. There is no fix for that. But what it really is acknowledging the fear or the anger or the hurt or the sorrow, the grief. And if we just sit there for a few minutes and are with those people and just, I see you, you just think, I see you. I recognize that you're hurting, and when I go into that space, that fear just kind of melts away. And I don't have room for that fear because I'm mourning with those that are hurting. And the fact is if our world, if that becomes us, right? If we become one of those where our world has turned upside down, what's amazing is that even in that we have the opportunity to see on an individual moment by moment beautiful things. It's still available to us. And the beauty of the earth is in the eye of the beholder, really. So that doesn't mean, and again, it doesn't mean that we bypass and we say to that person, just look for all the good. No, it's both. And it's feeling the hurt. And then if you're open to it, you will be opened up to little moments of beauty, little moments of love. There's a great movie called Collateral Beauty. And that's the whole idea, is that when we have this event that happens in our lives that changes our world, moves our world upside down, blows up our world, that and it's devastating, and there's this collateral beauty where all of a sudden we just have these moments of beauty, and they don't erase the pain, they don't take away the pain, but at the same time we can't deny that there's moments of beauty, of kindness, even in the midst of that, and to take each moment by moment, and for us to be there for those that are suffering, and to also reach out when we are suffering. Like, that's how humanity gets better. It's not by making all of the bad stuff go away. It's about us each connecting with each other and being there for each other when we need it, and also reaching out when we need it, and having that flow of connectedness. That's what will actually fix everything, is that, versus everything else. And so it's really helpful to be very in tune and mindful of what people are saying, not out loud. What are they actually saying when they say things? Are they what's really going on? What are they really feeling? So again, just to sum up, when we live each moment authentically with that hope, so we're authentically sad, but there's this background of hope. Maybe we cry when the moments call for tears, and we laugh when it calls for laughter. And we don't make one moment have to define the other. So I hope that understands, or I hope that answers your question. Another question, a couple more. Is there a way to access healing light from beyond the veil that heals our physical bodies? I absolutely believe there's healing light from our that we can, or whatever you want to call it. Again, vocabulary word. I'm not going to go into all of those, what that means to you, but is there access to healing? I think absolutely. And one of the things that we have to understand is that at some point our body does have to transition. And so, if we think about, if we all just had, we got to age 77 and we were done, and that was just, there wasn't anything else, I think it would inhibit our ability to have certain experiences. And so, if I think about weighing it out, is it nice if just death becomes just not painful? Okay, yeah, that would be great that it's not painful, but we're letting go of all these other things that are really valuable. So in order to bring that up, okay, then you know what? Okay, now we have fear and we have unknown about death and we have pain and struggle, and we bring in all, in order to have that not be 77, then we're going to have the spectrum of ways that our bodies transition, our bodies go over, which, even though it's so painful, in the end, I would, even if it's 51% better plan, it's just a little better plan. And so once we bring that in, then we have all of these, then the possibilities of how our body is going to need to transition over becomes almost endless. So then our body has to go at some point. So even if we want to bring in that healing, our bodies are meant to deteriorate and go on. And at the same time, we have suffering that exists that so the suffering is the thing that we are really wanting to change. It's the suffering in our bodies. And I know people who, are in the middle of dying, or I've seen people in the middle of dying and they are not suffering. And that's where that whole healing, becoming whole, is really valuable, because our goal is to be that whole, is to not suffer. And suffering comes when we are attached to the loss. And I was thinking about this as I was getting ready, because we have loss all the time. I pulled out I was brushing my hair and it's fall time. So I've got, there was a bunch of hair that came out as I was brushing my hair, and I had no grief about it. I was not sad about it, and I was not concerned about it, because my attachment to it is just there. If I lose a fingernail, or I found out, I think I left something on my trip in my hotel room, I'm like, did I leave that there? And I've got a little bit of grief, but it's not the same as losing something else, or not. I'm not suffering necessarily because that attachment is not there. So when we learn, but of course, love is a form of attachment. See how it's so difficult, because there's just always the other side. But having love, of course, we're going to grieve when our loved ones have passed. Of course, that would not make sense if we did not. But yet there's grieving. Is grieving the same as suffering? I don't know if that needs to be exactly the same. So what we're really calling for is the relief of suffering. And in that, we look at, we got to look at the definitions of what's happening and what that means to you and what that represents to you and how that feels to you, so that we can work through that suffering, so that we can work through. But as far as chilling, accessing the light, yeah. That's the moments of quiet. It's the moments of allowing for that moment, because I think if you're in that, whether it's meditation or just laying on your bed and taking those deep breaths and feeling the energy of that heart, in just a few minutes, if you really pay attention, am I suffering right now? Am I suffering right now? I'm not. And so the attachment to whatever ailment is happening is kind of separated for a minute, and we're in this moment of being okay. And that's the whole point, is expanding that out. And sometimes we need some help to do that, because we have some trauma, we have some blocked or ideas, some beliefs that are stopping that. We don't know until we really take some time to really ask some questions and to be curious about what's causing the discomfort. But as far as the suffering, yeah, we can do that at any time. So anyway, I think we will end there. It was amazing to be with you today. I'm trying to see if I've missed anything. Nothing. Yep, everybody got the questions answered. So great. It's been good being with you today. Make sure to, again, go to thewholenessnetwork.com and subscribe so that you can know when our next episodes are going to be scheduled. So we will see you next time, everyone. Bye-bye. Feel empowered every day with wholeness videos, meditations, downloads, classes, and more by joining the Wholeness Library at thewholenessnetwork.com.